on the outskirts of Manu National Park, this guy, local guy, started going into the jungle and like leaving them piles of bananas because they're hunter-gatherers. They don't have metal. They missed out on the wheel. They've never held a spoon. These are people that are out there. And so he'd leave them a machete and some bananas and they'd come take it. And then after like a year, he would start being there when they came to take it. And then after some time, he was actually able to interact with them. And he could only speak a few words of their language.
What do they speak?
They're called the Mashkopiro tribe. And so they speak some sort of, some dialect of the Yine language. But this guy who was interacting with them, one day they found him, they call it Porcupine. Arrows sticking up out of his body, like several arrows. We don't know why they killed him.
Don't really have to work with governments because, like you said, these are the places where the governments don't even go and everything goes.
Exactly. This is literally one of the most lawless places on earth. Like when we want to bring, if we have invaders on a piece of land, and again, it'll be like the locals will call us and be like, look, we just got noticed that there's loggers and they've cut down like 3 ancient trees and they're doing all this stuff. If we try and get the local authorities out there, the corruption is unbelievable. First of all, they'll notify the loggers that we're coming. Next, you have to wonder if they're going to try and, take bribes. I mean, it's so difficult to get this work done, but on the ground, we just keep hitting it and keep hitting it and keep hitting it and keep working with the local guys. A lot of the people that we're seeing now are guys that used to be loggers, and they're so hard. I mean, this happened with like Teddy Roosevelt. He was a hunter, and then he started to see how quickly this stuff was vanishing. And he's like, yeah, I was a hunter, but I love it. And so when you see the hole start to drain, start to go away, you go, no, we got to protect it. And so a lot of these old Amazonian guys that grew up being loggers, now they're in their 70s and they're like, look, I cut a lot of trees in my time, but what's happening now is wholesale destruction. And they're like, how can I help? And some of them are landowners and they're like, can I add my land to your reserve? And they want to help create this corridor because they see their way of life going.
How many people do you have now?
I think right now we have 11 rangers, and we have 2 indigenous female rangers. We have we're working with the local communities. We have a couple guys that used to work as loggers. It's really an awesome team. And that's where one of our guys, he's from this community that's further upriver, and he was actually shot in the head by an arrow.
Is this you sent me a text, so you're down there away from signal sometimes, so you were here, and then you were back down the Amazon in August, and I wanted to check in maybe like 3 weeks later, and I send you a text, I get a response back like 3 days later, and it said, I was just like, how's everything going down there? And you're like, it's insanity. Near the cities, the burning continues, but I'm out in the farthest reaches, messaging on a sat link. Out here 2 days back, the Uncontacted Tribes killed 3 loggers. Their 6-foot arrows have a greater range than the logger's shotgun. I mean, I don't even know what to say to that. Like, you just said,
what's up, man?
I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, right. Wow. Yeah. So I guess the arrow went into that guy's head. Fuck. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, no.
So,
and that, I mean, I was out. Like, I could show you on the map where I was, and it was the middle of nowhere, and they had a sat link. And so, like, I just, like, turned my phone on and, like, connected to the Wi-Fi, and, like, 2 things came through. And it was like, you can't load anything, but it's just, you can send out an SOS or something, and somehow your text message slipped through in the middle of it. It's hilarious.
But that's the kind of shit you guys are dealing with. Because, again, like you were saying earlier, just because there's so much info going today, I want to make sure people don't forget some of the stuff. But it's like some of these tribes, like, they've never been talked to. So everyone's their enemy. Anyone who's a human being is their enemy. No. So you got to be head on a swivel with them.
Yeah. And even, so there was a story where on the outskirts of Manu National Park, this guy, local guy, started going into the jungle and like leaving them piles of bananas because they're hunter gatherers. They're nomadic through the forest, and so he started leaving them piles of bananas and maybe like a machete. They don't have metal. They missed out on the wheel. They've never held a spoon. These are people that are out there. No shoes, no clothes, and so he'd leave them a machete and some bananas, and they'd come take it. And then after like a year, he would start being there when they came to take it, and they would see him, and he would see them. And then after some time, he was actually able to interact with them. He could only speak a few words of their language, but this
what
went
do
on.
They speak?
The guys on our river speak. They're called the Mashkopiro tribe, and so they speak some sort of some dialect of the Yine language, and but this guy who was interacting with them, one day they found him. They call it Porcupine. arrows sticking up out of his body, like several arrows. We don't know why they killed him. He was only there to help them. He absolutely loved these people, was advocating for their rights. He did something, or they interpreted something he did as a threat, and they killed him instantly. One of my best friends down there in 2004 was coming down a river as a logger. He's now a conservationist, but at that time he was working as a logger.
So he's from down there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. One of the local guys, real hard ass, this guy named Victor. And they ambushed some of his people, and by the time he got there, I think it was his brother-in-law, was on the beach, flayed open at the stomach. They'd removed his testicles, they'd cut off his arms, and they'd opened his stomach to see what he was eating. And his wife had been with him when this happened.
To see what he was eating.
To see what he was eating, because we're that foreign to them. They don't understand. And just like a fish, they're like, let's see what it was eating. And there's no laws out there. So they shot him in the leg. They started the battle cry. They started running out of the forest, and he knew he wasn't going to run fast enough to reach the river. So he told his wife, just run for it. She ran, jumped in the river, and just floated down the Amazon. He got ripped apart on the beach. And so when my guys showed up, they found him. There's blood all over the sand. And when they found his wife, she told them what happened. And so they just had to like pick up the pieces of him and go. And there was arrows all over the beach. For nothing. Because they were curious. Because they're scared of outsiders. And again, you can't really...
They know it's a human.
They know it's a human, but you can't really fault these people for this type of action either, because they're coming from times where they were so persecuted.
Right.
So you have to think that how has that mythology like intensified over the years? Where like, grandparents telling their grandchildren, we remember. Like if you get one thing from me before I die, remember that if those outsiders get you, you're dead. Kill them first. Shoot first.
And it's a tight enough community that can actually work, because they don't have
zero access.
I mean, like, how big are the average uncontacted tribe that lives in, I assume, like one place only? Like what, like their base? Like how big is it?
I mean, most of the ones that we deal with are nomadic, and so like I think as many as 20 or 40 in a group, in a clan. But like, there's a lot of questions. How are they staying?
There's only 20 to 40 in a community?
It's the thing is, everything's under the forest. The Amazon is the great concealer of everything. So like, we see them when they come out onto the beaches. And so when they come out onto the beaches, how many of them are still in the forest? They're communicating using capuchin monkey calls. And this is another thing. One of my guys was
That's
out
not
there.
their language.
That's
though.
not their language, but they have like this shorthand where they can actually communicate using different animal sounds. And they know what these different calls mean. And they have like a parlance between them.
Different animal sounds at the same time and patterns? Or like, are they going to stick to like just the sound of X animal?
I can't believe that we lost this video, but this guy had a video when they had made contact and the tribe was there and they had their arrows and they're pointing their arrows across the beach. And the guys in the community are trying to send them a canoe filled with bananas because they're like, look, we're friends. And they're trying to make an offering, like, stop the killing. So they tried to send them a thing, and you can hear the tribes, and they're talking using monkey calls. And we know what a capuchin monkey sounds like. And
what does it sound like?
Can't do it well. But they're using these calls in the video on the beach, and they're like communicating with each other. And the scary thing is that if you're ever camping alone in the forest, which is something that I started doing when I was young there, if you ever hear animal sounds that are not quite right at night, you get up and leave. Because if they're getting close to you and they don't want you to hear human sounds, they'll start communicating in animal voices. And so, yeah, there's a few guys that were out there, and they started hearing like sounds that were just a little bit off. You hear like a laughing falcon sound, and he was like, that doesn't actually sound like a... And then he heard the capuchins from different areas, and usually capuchin monkeys are going to be all together in one spot. And he heard it from different directions, and he was just like, he said he climbed into the river and crawled like a turtle out of that. He said he went for hours and just to escape.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.